Before I get started on this next announcement here, again, we'll have a presentation today by Chief Steve Hawks, former Chief Steve Hawks, retired CAL FIRE Deputy Director, as well as a former board member for the California Fire Safety Council. Steve Hawks was the Director of Wildfire Policy, or is the Director of Wildfire Policy for the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. Steve holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Forest Resource Management with a minor in Business Administration from Humboldt State University. Steve's responsibilities at IBHS include wildfire policy and code development, post-fire analysis, and implementation of wildfire prepared home program. Steve has over 3 decades of experience in wildland firefighting and prevention, having served since 1989 with California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, CAL FIRE, until his retirement in December 2022. He was promoted through the ranks from firefighter to Assistant Deputy Director of CAL FIRE and Office of State Fire Marshal's Community Wildfire Preparedness and Mitigation and Fire Engineering and Investigations Division. That's a long one, Steve. Additionally, he served for 13 years on CAL FIRE's Incident Management Team. So without any further, I'll be handing it over to Steve, who's going to put on an amazing presentation today. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Mike. I really appreciate that. Thanks for having me here today. And let me get set up here real quick, do a couple housekeeping items. And sharing my screen. Can you see it all right? Yes, okay, great. Let me try and move this out of the way. There we go. Okay, so thanks everybody for joining us here. And Mike gave a great introduction of my background. I've been really fortunate the last several years of my career with CAL FIRE to work with a lot of different organizations, IBHS being one of them, and NIST another one, and had the fortunate opportunity to join IBHS as Director of Wildfire Policy here recently. At some point today, Mark Vaughn, who you see listed on the screen there, is our Wildfire Operations Manager for our Wildfire Prepared Home program. He's going to join us, and maybe he'll take some comments, but both of us are located here in California. And if you're not familiar with IBHS, we are a nonprofit that is funded through the insurance and reinsurance industry, and we conduct research on 4 different perils: wind, rain, hail, and wildfire. And you see on the photograph in the background on this slide, this is our research center located in Richburg, South Carolina. We also have another facility in Tampa, Florida. But at this facility, you see that large structure in the center. That's our test chamber that we have 105 fans that can blow up to 130 mile an hour winds and subject full-size structures at around 1,600 square feet up to these 4 different perils. And in the test chamber, we will expose a structure to embers and then see how those embers flow around the structure, how they impact the building materials and components. And then we also do testing on the backside, opposite that big bank of fans you see in the center of the screen there. On the backside of that building, we'll test structures, and we're looking at structure-to-structure fire spread, because we know in tightly spaced communities where structure separation distances are not very big, that structure-to-structure fire spread is a significant issue. And so I like to play this short video here. This is a clip from a fire in 2022 in Balch Springs, Texas. And this fire started in this grass field and then quickly burned up against this subdivision, and then got into the backyards. And this just is a really good example, excuse me, good example of how quickly a fire can spread from a wildland area into the built environment and impact a lot of homes in a short amount of time. Now, this fire was pushed into the backyards of these homes because of the wind that was present that day. And you can see how the fire propagated amongst those structures really utilizing the fences as the means of transmitting the fire between the structures. And we'll talk more about some of these different things like fences, outbuildings, and other components of the structure and their immediate surroundings, and how all that plays into allowing a wildfire to get to a structure and then cause its destruction. Now, we've taken this and re-rendered it, if you will, from Jack Cohen, who was a fire scientist with the U.S. Forest Service, is now retired. And this is Jack Cohen's disaster sequence. So if you look at that video that I just showed, we had an ignition source of a fire in that grass field. And under intense fire conditions where we experience high losses during a wildfire, the three factors that determine the intensity of a fire, the fuel, weather, and topography, all align, and particularly under drought conditions, any semblance of drought conditions, along with wind component. Wind is the biggest driver of wildland fire. So when the wind is 20 to 30 mile an hour range or greater, and we have drought conditions, enough fuel to drive the fire, topography that aids in the spread of the fire, then that fire can quickly burn into a built environment. And it can get into structures that are highly susceptible to the fire if they haven't been retrofitted or upgraded to more ignition resistant or non-combustible materials. And the firefighting resources will come in and try to defend all these structures, but their first priority is on life safety. So they're going to concentrate on defending lives, getting people out of harm's way before they turn to structure protection or defense and trying to suppress the fire. And in cases where the fire burns into a built environment quickly, the number of structures that need defense can quickly outnumber the available firefighting resources. And when that occurs under these strong wind conditions, then it can lead to a suburban conflagration, like we've seen on the car fire, the camp fire, Tubbs fire, recently with the Lahaina fire, to name just a few. I really like this picture here. It was taken on the campfire, and NIST conducted a post-fire analysis of the campfire and has produced 4 documents related to that, and has another one, a 5th one, to come here in the near future. And so this, Alex Marangridis from NIST conducted a lot of technical discussions, and one that they conducted with a CAL FIRE engine company that was in this neighborhood. They took these pictures, CAL FIRE did, and this is in Magalia, California, just north of Paradise. And I really like it because you can see the 3 means of transportation that the fire can take to get to a house. So if you can see my cursor, you can see the fire on the picture on the left is on the fence and the tree. So that direct flame contact from the tree is getting to the structure. And I think you can see maybe a little bit of fire underneath the eaves right here. So direct flame contact can extend the fire from a tree or some other burning object directly to the house. Radiant heat from these items burning together can also extend that fire to the structure. And then up here above the house, you see all the embers coming off the tree and other items that are burning nearby that are landing on this structure and then being carried downwind and landing on other structures. So those are the 3 modes of transportation that a fire can take to get to a structure. And then the photo on the right, which was taken roughly a little over 2 minutes later after the photo on the left, you can see that all these items contributed to the fire getting to the structure, getting underneath the eaves, and this structure was completely lost during the campfire. And it just illustrates different pathways that a fire can take to get to a home. And when you combine things like combustible items on the ground, maybe wood debris, leaves, pine needles, mulch, the fence, this tree, all those things burning together create enough intensity and enough direct flame contact that they could ignite that structure and bring it to the ground. So embers and flames, that's what we need to protect our structures against. And through a lot of experiments that we've conducted at the lab, not only us, but also other research organizations like NIST and others, as well as post-fire analysis, we've determined that embers are the leading cause of home ignitions. And so first and foremost, we need to deal with the embers because they're always present no matter whether the fire is in grass, brush, timber, or burning fences or other outbuildings or other items on a property. If it is a combustible item and it can burn, it can also produce embers. And then those can transmit to the house, either directly by igniting something on or within the house, if the embers pass through a vent inside the house, or if it lands in the 5 feet immediately surrounding a structure. If an ember lands in that area, it can ignite items within that first 5 feet and then indirectly extend that fire to the house itself. And we know from the CAL FIRE damage inspection database that if a home catches fire, there is greater than 90% chance that the house will be completely destroyed. So we need to protect homes from catching fire in the first place. And so I really like this picture. This is inside the test chamber that the IBHS Research Center in South Carolina. And you can see we have ember generators that we can expose a structure to embers and then see how those embers flow around the structure and how they interact with the different building materials and components of the structure. So first, you can see that certain number of embers flow up over top of the structure. They also get underneath the eaves and can travel in through vents at the eave line, as well as if there's any spacing between the roof structure and the wall where that intersection comes together. Potentially those embers can get in through those areas into the attic space. Embers also flow around the structure to the sides. And then the last thing, and one of the biggest and most important things to understand about this picture is the vortex that's created as these embers are cast by the wind. And in this picture on the right-hand side is our big bank of fans, and it's blowing these embers up against this structure. And so when the embers are cast up against the structure, it creates a pressure against that structure and causes a certain percentage or a certain number of these embers to travel down and then back away from the structure. So these embers are being pushed out from the structure away from it. So those embers that are being pushed down and then away from the structure, they basically fall into two kind of categories here. So the first category is the heavier embers that just fall to the base of the structure and travel against the wall and the intersection with the ground, and they travel along that space. So anything that accumulates, like debris that accumulates in this area or other combustible items that are in this area could potentially ignite from these embers, and then that fire can be transmitted to the structure. So we'll talk about this in a little bit in a couple slides, but we definitely recommend a vertical non-combustible area of 6 inches at the base of any horizontal area and vertical area because of this, exactly what you're seeing in this slide here. So the other embers are the lighter ones, and they get pushed out away from the structure. And you can see that at a certain point, they kind of form a line and travel in this line around the side of the structure, and then they push out to the sides. And this line is the point at which the pressure or the wind speed that's pushing these embers out away from the structure and the wind speed that's pushing towards the structure equalize. And this is known as the stagnation point. And so, again, this is the point where the two pressures equalize and allows those embers to form in a line and travel. And that's that distance out is roughly 5 feet and is a function of the height of the structure. And so that's why we'll get into the 0 to 5 foot zone in a little bit in some slides and talk more in detail about it. But that is why or how the zone 0, also known as the ember ignition zone, non-combustible zone, it's that first 5 feet immediately surrounding the structure is so critical because of all these embers that travel in and out of that area and have the potential to ignite combustible items. So now what I'd like to do is switch and talk about each of the components of the structure, the exterior components, starting at the roof line down to the ground. Then we'll talk about decks, fences, and outbuildings. And we have here on the screen some our researchers, Faraz Hedayati, did a lot of looking at papers and stuff and finding where certain things are cited about each of the different components and bringing forth all the relevant research that's been conducted in wildfire mitigation related to the built environment. And we definitely see a statistical correlation between wood roofs and loss of the structure. So fortunately, there's over 99% of the structures in California have a Class A rated roof already. So having a wood roof is not a lot of thing that we see out there in California a lot. But if there is still a wood roof, particularly a non-fire retardant treated wood roof, it definitely needs to be replaced because the roof is the most vulnerable component of the structure. Sits high up, it's a large surface area, has a tendency to allow for the accumulation of debris, also allow for the accumulation of embers during a wildfire. It's never a good thing to bring those two together, especially on a combustible wood roof, and that could lead to the loss of the structure. We've also seen that, as I just mentioned, because of the design of a roof, debris can accumulate in the valleys and in gutters and other areas of the roof line. And wherever debris tends to accumulate is also where embers during a wildfire will gravitate to for the same reason as the debris does. And when you ignite those two, it's never a good thing. But having a Class A rated roof will hopefully allow that material to burn off and the roof will stay intact and protect the home. So our guidance on roofs is first, have a Class A rated roof. And then secondly, maintain that roof clear of debris at all times, particularly during, wildfire, when wildfires are prone in California during the summer months. Gutters. So in this picture, you see the gutter that's kind of falling down during one of the experiments that was conducted at the research center. That is a vinyl gutter that melted and is dropping to the ground. And on the right-hand side of that roof line, you'll see a metal gutter that is still intact. And so debris has a tendency to accumulate in gutters, as we know, and also embers can travel to those areas and ignite that debris. And when you have a vinyl gutter, that can melt and drop to the ground, exposing the wood fascia board behind it, which exposes that roof's edge to direct flame contact. When you have a metal gutter, even though the debris may be burning inside that metal gutter is protecting that wood fascia board and that roof's edge from that direct flame contact. So our guidance for gutters is non-combustible gutters and downspouts, and then maintain a non-combustible gutter cover over top of that to prevent debris from accumulating inside the gutter. And then, however, in this example, debris can accumulate on top of the gutter up against the edge of the roof right here. So even though you put a non-combustible gutter cover on, it still likely does require some maintenance of clearing off debris from on top of that gutter. We don't ever want debris accumulating here and then embers igniting that debris right at the roof line. So it still does require some maintenance of debris. Okay, eaves and soffits. So open eave designs that incorporate a wood fascia board are vulnerable to direct flame contact, as you're seeing in this experiment that we conducted just outside the test chamber at our facility in South Carolina. They're an area where flame and heat can accumulate underneath, and they're also areas where vents are located. And when you put those combination of things together, that allows for the fire to get developed underneath the eave line, to travel in through openings in wood blocking or through the vents themselves, and then could lead to the destruction of the house. So the guidance for eaves and soffits is to enclose them and do that with non-combustible materials. Vents with just metal mesh greater than 1/8 of an inch, as you see here in the video, allow for embers to pass through into the space behind wherever that vent is located, whether it's a foundational vent or an attic vent, or a vent that's up on the roof line. So our guidance for this is vents with metal mesh that is non-corrosive, that have openings of a 1/8 inch or less. Now we like to say 1/8 inch is the best because it prevents the embers from passing through that have enough energy in them that will ignite something combustible on the other side of that vent. So when you get down to a 1/16 of an inch vent, then those vents tend to clog up a little bit easier and don't perform their normal function of allowing airflow to get in and out of the structure to keep moisture down inside the attic space. So it's a combination of, trying to accommodate for what the vents are normally designed for airflow and creating moisture, keeping moisture out of the attic space, as well as providing for fire protection. And so as you see in the picture on the screen here, a simple test of knowing whether your attic vents, the mesh is too big or not, is to take a golf tee or even a nail. And if you can push the golf tee or the nail through the mesh, then the mesh is too big and should be replaced. And so again, 1/8 inch mesh is the right size that we recommend. There's newer vents out there that also account for not only embers but are flame resistant vents, and so they're don't allow for flame to pass through them. So either retrofitting a structure with those ember and flame resistant vents or just metal mesh is a good option, either one of those. For new construction, Chapter 7A of the California Building Code requires the first one, the ember and flame resistant vents. For dryer vents, we want to see a metal louver with no mesh, because the dryer vent needs to exhaust out of your dryer. It's going to have some lint that comes with it. We don't want the lint to get accumulated on the metal mesh and clog up the vent. That defeats the purpose of the vent and also creates fire hazard. So just having a dryer vent with a metal louver or flap is the guidance for this. For siding, combustible cladding or siding allows the fire to spread quickly vertically and expose other areas of the structure like windows, the under eave area, vents to the fire, and can result in rapid fire growth. So what we like to say is non-combustible siding reduces the vulnerability of walls to flames. The picture here, which was taken on a post-fire analysis of the glass fire in Sonoma County that burned from Napa to Sonoma County in 2020. This is vinyl siding. There really wasn't a lot of combustible vegetation close by this structure. It was down below the structure. Just the radiant heat coming off of all the stuff burning in the area caused this vinyl siding to melt and deform, which exposes the underlayment behind it to the fire or embers. So having a non-combustible siding or an ignition resistant siding is the best way to go for siding. We just really don't want fire getting on the siding and then extending that fire to the window area or this gable end vent that's up here, or getting underneath the eaves, because once that happens, the likelihood of the structure being a loss goes up tremendously. So we got to keep the fire off the siding. It isn't so much an issue of the fire penetrating through the wall space and getting into the structure that way. It's more of an issue of the siding allowing the fire to get to the other vulnerable components of the structure. Windows. So windows, there's a lot of research going on around windows right now. Basically, most of the guidance that's out there on windows is multi-pane, at least 2 panes, but multi is good as well, or more than 2 panes provides the best protection. And also that both of those, that tempered glass provides a higher level of heat resistance than regular annealed glass, which you see here. This is annealed glass in this picture. Also, this frame that holds up this vinyl screen that was over top, you see it bent down here, but screens do provide good protection for windows from heat and provide added protection to the glass behind it, allowing it to withstand radiant heat longer than it would if the screen wasn't there in place. So the guidance here is multi-pane windows with at least 2 panes, and both of those panes being tempered glass provides the best protection. And where you have a window that is openable, that area that is openable have a screen that covers that area, so that in the event that that screen or that window is open and you're unable to shut it as the fire is approaching, that'll provide some level of protection, hopefully enough to not allow embers and flame to get inside. But it also does provide an added layer of protection to the glass behind it, helping to make it stand up to the radiant heat for a longer period of time. Now, the Underwriters Laboratory, their Fire Safety Research Institute, is conducting some testing on windows right now. And they're looking at different configurations of windows, both being dual paned, but dual pane with both panes being annealed glass, dual pane with 1 pane being annealed and 1 pane being tempered, in different configurations of the tempered being on the outside pane or the inside pane, or a dual pane where both panes are tempered glass. In all instances so far, their testing showed that both panes being annealed gives you the least protection. Both panes being tempered gives you the greatest level of protection. And then the different configurations of tempered glass, whether that tempered pane is on the inside pane or the outer pane. The inner pane being tempered provides the best level of protection if you're only able to get one tempered pane, which is currently the requirement of the California Building Code Chapter 7A. It says that one pane has to be tempered. It doesn't specify which of the panes needs to be tempered, but based on the latest research from FSRI, it should be the inner pane if you only go with one pane being tempered. However, again, our guidance and FSRI's research says that both panes being tempered provides the best level of protection for windows. One thing that windows and codes right now don't take into consideration is what the framing material is made out of. And when you have a frame that is made of vinyl, then this window here is not made of vinyl, but frame. But when you do, that frame can deform and create gaps between the frame and the wood framing of the structure itself, which would allow embers to pass through. And there's also some vinyl pieces that go around the frame that help hold the window in place and hide the glue strip and framing behind it. And those have a tendency to warp and fall off the window, exposing that glue strip behind that molding. And over time, that glue strip, this is what our opinion is that the glue strip can heat up and allow that pane to fall out. And I'll show you in a video I have coming up here of the panes falling out. And it's not a good thing when the panes are falling out of a window. So on the doors, the vulnerability here is the base of the doors, really from accumulation of debris and ember accumulation getting up against the doors and the wood framing of the door itself. So we saw in NIST was able to, during their post-fire analysis of the Waldo Canyon fire, determine that this was a frequent damage that they saw on that fire. We've seen this in other large fires as well, that doors can be a vulnerability. And so the guidance for doors is to have a fire rated door with at least a 20-minute fire rating, or have one that is non-combustible, metal, fiberglass, or something similar. The other thing that we want to take a look at with doors is the metal threshold for the door, or the threshold in general. We want to make sure that this is metal and not wood for obvious reasons. The other thing that you might see, this threshold rests directly on the concrete slab, but you might see that this is slightly elevated with the wood underneath that. So you want to take a close look at that and see if that needs to be protected, because that could be a vulnerability where debris, embers will accumulate during a fire and ignite that wood that's underneath that threshold and could extend that to the rest of the door and or siding and lead to the loss of the house. Under bay windows. So we've seen in a number of post-fire analysis, this is also a picture taken of a house over in Sonoma County on the glass fire, where if under bay or a bay window does not extend completely to the ground, and there is, in this case, they planted ornamental plants underneath of it, that the embers got into this area and ignited this material. Fortunately, they had stucco siding and so forth in it, and didn't allow that fire underneath this bay window to extend to the rest of the house. But it is a definitely a potential vulnerable area of the structure. So our guidance is to extend this wall all the way to the ground and make it non-combustible materials, so that fire doesn't have a chance to get underneath of that bay window and present a problem, because under bay windows can be considered very similar to underneath an eave, where heat, fire can get kind of trapped in that area and present a problem. So 6 inches of vertical non-combustible space. Remember, if I go back to the couple slides I showed of the embers with the research that was done in our test chamber at our laboratory in South Carolina, that those heavy embers fall to the ground and travel right along the base of the ground and that wall where they intersect. And so that's why we recommend 6 inches of vertical non-combustible area there. It also happens to coincide with moisture issues unrelated to fire that codes are taking into consideration, that have stem wall that comes up off the ground, keeping the wood and other items off the ground because of moisture issues. Well, this is a co-benefit of having also taking into consideration wildfire preparedness of that 6 inches, because if you have debris, even if you're really on top of clearing debris from around your home during a wildfire event that's associated with wind, debris can come out of trees, blow up against the structure, accumulate in this area. That's also going to be a location where embers will gravitate to and could ignite that debris and extend it to the siding of the house. So 6 inches of vertical non-combustible area is really important here. And so this just illustrates that. That could be the 6 inches of the concrete stem wall from the house, if that's how your home is constructed, or a combination of the concrete stem wall and the siding. As long as we have 6 inches of vertical non-combustible area, that meets the requirement. Now, one thing to take a look at is right underneath this lip here, where we have this stem wall coming up and the siding coming together. Even though this is concrete stem wall, stucco siding, take a look at this area underneath here and see if there's any combustible components of that wall that are exposed to that fire. So if debris accumulates here and embers find this debris, ignite it, and a small fire develops up against the base of this wall, we don't want it finding any vulnerable component underneath this this wall where it extends up to the stem wall here. So on to decks. Decks can be vulnerable both from the top and from the underneath. Obviously, from the top, their exposure is mostly from embers, but from the underneath, it is from a fire developing or flames developing on the underside of the deck. So we'll play this short video here. This is research conducted at our laboratory. The deck on the left-hand side is wood surface area, but it has all metal framing components. Over here on the right-hand side, it's the same wood surface area, but combustible wood framing components, and you can see the difference between the two. So a fire starting underneath the deck is the biggest hazard to the deck, to a fire getting to the deck, and then that deck transmitting that fire to the house itself. But we also need to be cognizant about embers landing on top of the deck boards and potentially igniting a fire and allowing that fire to get to the structure as well. So our guidance here is clear the area underneath the deck. Nothing combustible underneath the deck. That is already a requirement by law, by Public Resources Code 4291 and the accompanying regulation in Title 14. Excuse me, but so that is already a requirement. Also, maintain an area around the deck of 5 foot of non-combustible area, and we'll talk about this in the very next slide. We'll get into that 5 foot zone immediately surrounding structure and other attachments like decks. Also, when a deck is elevated off the ground like this, but is 4 feet from the top of the walking surface, is 4 feet or less to the ground, we recommend that you enclose that area with a non-corrosive metal mesh to keep debris from accumulating or blowing in underneath the deck. Also, an area where then embers would blow in underneath, and having that combination of combustible debris, embers underneath the deck creating a fire is something we want to avoid. So when a deck is 4 feet or less, it's really much more difficult for someone to get underneath there and maintain that clear of debris and so forth. So that's why we recommend at that level, 4 feet or less, enclose that with a metal mesh. We also, for a higher level of protection, you want to make sure that the deck is constructed out of non-combustible materials, ideally, including the framing members, the deck joists, and the railings and so forth. So anything that's combustible on the deck or the deck itself can allow the fire to get to the structure. And then for on top of the deck, really try to limit combustible items that you place up there, like furniture or other items. And the items that are combustible, make sure that they're light enough that and few enough that you can move them when a wildfire is approaching. Get them either away from the house, off the deck, or take them inside the structure. We just don't want them on the structure, on that deck, when the fire reaches the house. Okay, so zone 0. Here in California, this isn't a newer term for us, although traditionally defensible space is only included 2 zones, zone 1 and zone 2, zone 1 being the first 30 feet out from the house. Zone 2 is from 30 feet out to 100 feet or to the property line, whichever is closer. Well, we do have this newer zone 0, although, as I mentioned, not quite as new to California compared to other parts of the country. But our guidance, as well as other research that's been conducted out there, really says that this zone, this first 5 feet that immediately surrounds the structure, including other attachments like decks and pergolas and so forth, needs to be non-combustible. Anything in this zone, like this picture was taken here of a fire in Southern California, allows embers to burn, to land in this zone, igniting this vegetation, and could potentially extend that fire to the structure. And so Dr. Seifert conducted some research back in 2014 that said, you know, reducing woody vegetation cover up to 40% in this area increases the structure's chance of survival. We also conducted some research with Zesty AI, and reducing vegetation in this 5-foot zone nearly doubles a property's chance of surviving a wildfire. So for defensible space, this zone 0 is the most critical zone for defensible space. Non-combustible, I go back to this picture that I showed you from our lab early on in the presentation. All these embers that travel right up against the base of the wall and the ground, these embers that flow out away from the structure and form this line here that flow around the structure. If there's anything combustible in this area, they could attach onto those combustible items that can also accumulate debris during the wildfire as the wind is blowing debris out of trees and other areas into this zone 0. And then these embers can find that, igniting that, and potentially transmit that fire to the structure. So this is definitely an area where continued research is going on. We are actively conducting research right now on the flammability of plants as related to zone 0. But as of right now, our guidance is that zone 0 needs to be non-combustible. So So on to the rest of the guidance. So nothing combustible in this zone, no vegetation, no wood mulch, and you can use other non-combustible items, and including fences, and we'll get to fences here in just a minute, but that includes the fences that attach that 5 feet right up against the house. But for the rest of the defensible space, NIST had done some research back in 2013 on a post-fire analysis where 67% of the homes that had unmaintained vegetation in the first 30 feet were destroyed, while 32% of the homes with maintained defensible space were destroyed. So there's no guarantees on any of this. For sure, we're trying to drive down the risk to the structure as much as possible. We can never get it to zero, but we want to get it to as close to zero as possible, giving the home the best chance of survival. And that's all of these mitigation measures that we're running through, give it the home the best chance of survival. So fences. I'll play this short video of some more research conducted in the lab at IBHS, where fences provide a clear pathway for the fire to travel directly along the fence line to structures. We saw that in the first video I showed of the fire, the grass fire that burned in Texas, that burned up to the fences, got all the fences burning along the backyards, and then allowed that fire to travel down the fence line between the homes and then over directly to the houses. So fences being a linear feature that generally travel long distances in between homes have a big vulnerability of allowing the fire to transmit to the house itself. NIST also did a lot of testing on parallel fences and released a report last year on parallel fences. And they said even out to 4 to 5 feet range that the fire that develops between the fences is greater than the fire that would be on each individual fence if they were burning separately. But when you combine that, the intensity of that fire is less than the fences, the fire that's burning between the two fences. I hope that made sense, the way I explained it there. But when parallel fences are less than 5 feet away and they're on fire, the fire intensity that comes out of that fence is greater than 2 individual fences burning by themselves. So the guidance for fences is to replace combustible fences within the first 5 feet of the structure. And this is what the demonstration that was conducted outside the lab at IBHS is showing here in this short video. And then no parallel fences that are closer than 5 feet from each other. And you see that the fire started in the wood bark mulch here, transferred to the fence, and then that fence allowed the fire to go to the structure on the left-hand side. And watch the window here as it begins to deform, see the sag and then fall out. And as soon as the window fell out, I'll play this again, because I think it's a really informative about windows and the vulnerability with windows here. And watch as the fire gets to the structure, and then this window begins to sag up here. So that's going to create an opening, and then the window panes fall out, and then eventually the whole window assembly falls out. And once it does, then you really see the fire take off. So if about a month ago, we conducted 2 experiments like this in California, one in Orange County with the Department of Insurance, one in Sacramento the following day with CAL FIRE. Very similar demonstration to this. And in both of those demonstrations, we saw the exact same results as what you see in this video, that a small fire that simulated to being started by embers burning in wood bark mulch, if left unchecked, could then burn to the structure ignite the plants that were in the ornamental plants that are planted within that 5 feet, ignite the combustible fence, extend all of that fire to the structure itself, resulting in total loss. Whereas the structure on the other side that had non-combustible rock, an iron gate, and better construction materials that were used, non-combustible siding and so forth, that we just stepped through, was unharmed by the fire. So here's a video of some structure separation experiments that we're conducting, and NIST has been conducting as well. And it shows that flames and radiant heat can spread the fire from a shed to the home without firefighter intervention. And so what we're really looking to test is, one, the exterior materials of the shed, as well as the house, and then the structure separation distance between the two. At what distance does the shed no longer really present a hazard to the house if it was to catch fire? And I'll go back for a second and show this video again, and really watch as the roof begins to collapse here and the fire starts coming out the roof line. So we have the wind coming from our fans that's coming from the right-hand side, blowing across the shed here. But as soon as this wall that's on the upwind side begins to burn away and become exposed, that's when this fire goes from being kind of coming up this direction to being more direct towards the structure itself. Hopefully you are able to catch that. So the point of this is the orientation of doors, the orientation of windows, the construction materials that the shed is made out of really play a big role in what exposure that shed will play to the structure. And so watch here, I'll pause this briefly, but this window pane right now is falling out. And then in a second, this one up here, it will fall out as well. So I'm not going to play this video a couple times, but we've seen this on a number of occasions. This is where I mentioned when we were talking about windows that this molding here heats up, is vinyl, it heats up, it comes off the window, the glass behind it in a dual pane window, the glue behind it heats up and doesn't hold the pane itself in any longer, and the pane itself will fall out and break on the ground rather than stay in place. So we really need to look at windows as an assembly, the window frame as well as the window glass together make up the whole assembly. It's really critically important that we get those components right. So I'll play this and you can watch the windows fall out and break on the ground. But during this structure separation experiments, our research scientist here, Faraz Hediyati, who's bending down over here, here comes the other pane is about to fall out. He bent these the categories into 5 damage categories: no damage, minor damage, severe damage, potential total loss, and total loss. And we've seen this video play a couple times now, so I'll go ahead and move on to the next. And so all the different experiments are going to pop up here on this graph and show the separation distance, as well as whether it was a wood shed or a metal shed, and the category of damage that experienced with that particular type of shed in that distance. We saw no matter if it was a wood or metal shed at 10 feet, it's always a total loss. And these shed sizes in this experiment were between 12 and 24 feet. At 20 feet, we saw a range of damage, And then at 30 feet, we saw minor damage, which is basically cosmetic damage, a cracked window or similar. But so our guidance now is for outbuildings that we move sheds 30 feet away. And we also apply similar mitigation strategies as we do for the main home. So now that we've gone through all the different components, we like to talk about all of these things as a system that needs to work together. During these high intensity fires where we're having lots of embers cast onto structures, we're having radiant heat exposure, direct flame contact, all of these components need to work together. And when you have one component that is still vulnerable, it can allow a weakness in the structure that allows that structure to catch fire and come to a total loss. So that's where we get to a program that we've developed called the Wildfire Prepared Home Program. And the items that are just popped up on the screen in the brown boxes here are, we have two different levels to the program, a base level and a plus level. And these items are for the base level that are in the brown boxes. And so a Class A rated roof with no debris on it, gutters and downspouts that are made of metal, ember and flame resistant vents, 6-inch non-combustible vertical space around the base of the house and wall, no combustibles in that zone 0, that 0 to 5 foot area immediately surrounding the house, nothing underneath decks, enclosed low elevation decks with that metal mesh if it's 4 feet or less from the ground, extend out the defensible space, maintaining good defensible space the rest of the yard, particularly the first 30 feet, and then replace the fencing within the 5 foot zone as well. So this program right now is only in California. It is for single family homes, not multifamily, that are detached homes, single family homes up to 3 stories in height. And we're looking to potentially expand this program out to other states, Western states in particular, that are prone to wildfires like California. But moving on to the other level of the program is called the plus level, Wildfire Prepared Home Plus, and you can see the additional components of no back-to-back fencing, no combustible siding, enclose the eaves, enclose underneath bay windows, ember wildfire resistant deck materials, including the framing materials of the deck itself, windows, dual pane with both panes being tempered, doors with at least a 20-minute fire rating, cover gutters with a non-combustible gutter cover, and move out buildings at least 30 feet away. So these are the components of the program. And if you're interested in the designation, there's a process that you can go through to get the designation. So one, go to our wildfireprepared.org website. There is a homeowners drop-down menu that you can click on and then get to the homeowner's guide. Look through the guide and all the different components, and then make sure that your home meets that standard for that particular designation, whether it's the base level or the plus level. And then when you think that your home meets either of those designations and you want to seek the designation from IBHS, then return to our wildfireprepared.org website, and then start the process. The first thing that you want to do in the process is take a self-assessment of the property. Again, it's just to really make sure that you that the designation that you're seeking, that the home meets all of those requirements for that designation. We've had several people apply for the designation. We've sent assessors out to the property to determine that the home really didn't meet all the requirements of the designation. So we want you to really make sure before you apply on our website that your home meets those requirements. Once it does, you've taken that self-assessment survey, then go ahead and submit an application. You have to create an account, submit an application to IBHS. An inspection will be scheduled where an inspector will come out to the house, will run through, ensure that the property meets all the requirements for the whatever level of designation base or plus that you're seeking, and take photographs. All that will get uploaded to IBHS, where it will be gone through and final determination will be made whether the home meets the designation or not. If it does, then you will be issued the certificate that you see here on the screen. And I should note that there is a $125 fee currently that is due when you submit your application to IBHS. As I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, IBHS is a nonprofit. We're not trying to make any money off of this designation. We do hire currently a company called Millennium that goes out and does all the inspections for us. So the cost of that fee is to administer the program here in California, not to make any money off of it. We want people to take these steps to get this designation. The goal is that there's twofold for this designation. One is your property, your home will be more resilient to wildfire, driving down the risk from wildfire. And then two, when you have this designation in hand, this piece of paper that will hopefully transmit with the new Department of Insurance regulation requirements that insurance companies have to recognize here in California, hopefully this designation will transmit to more availability or affordability of insurance. Now it's up to each insurance company to determine whether and to what extent these requirements will translate to a reduction in the premium costs or not. That's not for IBHS to determine, but hopefully that is translating to more availability and affordability of insurance. In Paradise, I should note, though, that IBHS, where we first launched the program in the town of Paradise, where the first designation was granted, that IBHS has granted some funding to the town of Paradise. So the first 100 designations in the town, the town of Paradise will reimburse the homeowner for that $125 fee. That is only in the town of Paradise currently. This designation is good for 3 years. At each annual interval of that 3-year period, there is a landscape review. We just want to make sure that zone 0, that first 5 feet, and the immediate surrounding area, 30 feet out to 30 feet, is still maintained as it was when you received the designation. And you'll maintain that designation at that point. At the end of the 3-year period, if you want to keep the designation, you'll have to go through the whole process again of reapplying, getting the inspection, and paying the $125 fee. Now, this is a program that is only a little over a year old, and again, in California. So as this program begins to mature over time, and as we continue to do science and translate that science into mitigation actions, this program will evolve over time. So the way it looks today may be slightly different than the way it looks a year or so down the road. So as of today, that's the current requirements of the program. And with that, that's the end of the presentation. And if you like, we could take some questions.
Looks like one came in the chat, Steve, while you were presenting, in regards to from Andrew, that he said that it's super interesting to hear about the 5-foot buffer not being universal. So he's wondering if there was a mathematical function that's available for residents with larger or odd-shaped buildings to use.
So the 5 feet is from the exterior wall, extending out horizontally 5 feet from an exterior wall and then vertically to the sky. So nothing combustible in that area. And that includes surrounding decks and other attachments to the structure like pergolas and so forth. It's that area where really embers become a significant issue of transmitting the fire from far away directly up against the house, which potentially then allows that fire that develops from those embers to go to the house. So there's really no magical formula. Just measure 5 feet out from each wall, and that's the 5 feet zone.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions for Steve? That was all that we had in the chat. So feel free to, you can unmute yourself, you can raise your hand, or you can just jump in the chat as well. Feel free to jump in if anyone has any questions for Steve.